Hi everybody, welcome to another video. This is one that's been requested by quite a few people across the various channels that I'm on, and it's essentially a quick sort of tutorial on how I built the biggest mansion I've ever built on Fallout 76. You can see it here. If you haven't seen it already, the full walkthrough, the link is below. Please do take a look. So first thing to mention is the budget. Obviously there's a lot of constraints on this game, and a lot of people again ask me how I managed to fit quite so much in with the limited budget we have. First thing to mention is I'm in a shelter. This is the summer camp shelter, as you can see from the lake. I've got nothing else in here apart from that little boat down there, just to, I don't know, spruce up the lake a tiny bit. It's a nice view, and that's the reason I use this particular shelter. And also, it's a hillside mansion, and it's the only shelter I know of with a hill, funny enough. So why did I use a shelter? You get much more budget than if you was to do it in the sort of open world, so to speak. And that, of course, helps with budget constraints immediately. I can't remember the exact increase in budget, but it's substantial. So second thing, just a few sort of basic tips on how to manage your budget a bit more effectively. So you can see here I've used the single wall method, so there's no wallpaper on the outside. If I go to here, you can see that it is there's a greenhouse in there actually, but let's grab that one. The fire hazard wall, just for this nice little brick effect on the outside. And I've only used, as I say, one side of it for wallpaper on the inside, as you can see through that window. That saves a hell of a lot of budget because you're not doubling up on walls. And of course I can double up on roofs instead. And another little trick here is to try and incorporate some design methods into your builds. As you can see there, I haven't doubled up in the middle. I thought it looked quite cool. And it saves me quite a number of roof pieces from my budget, and still makes it look like it's part of the build. So it's just trying to find those little shortcuts, if you will, to save some budget for other details. So another quick budget tip, if we just go inside here, you can see that I actually have no lights hanging from the ceiling in any of my rooms. Obviously you've got to make sure that your lighting is effective enough to get lights pouring through the windows, so you don't actually need the lights, especially at night time. People can still enjoy the build without worrying about, falling over things, I suppose. Why? Because the lights take up a hell of a lot of budget. And actually, instead, I've used that budget to incorporate some, again, details. So the neon letters here that I've used for the handles on the custom kitchen that I built here, you can see that I've used 50 of them, not just here, obviously, but throughout the build. So I've opted for detail instead of lights, because I can get away with not having any lights. And actually you'll see a common theme in my builds that there's no lights. For that reason, it just saves budget, and I can put little details here down like rum bottles, etc., just to liven the place up a bit. So that's another little hint / tip that you can use for your builds. So another little tip here is room spacing, sizings, that sort of stuff. And it's just trying to avoid your big properties looking empty or otherwise not lived in or detailed enough. Obviously people do comment on that and say there's not enough in this corridor or in this room. Easy way of getting around that, especially with the free placement mode. So you can see here the master bedroom, it's a 2x2 foundation. So it's quite a large, I've got a built-in wardrobe there just to take up some space there. Some small details just to make it look lived in, and detailed and furnished enough so it doesn't look sparse. But then other rooms that you don't quite need to be as big. Here we've got a 1.5 foundation, and I've just overlapped them. So it means I have to furnish less space, and I can make it all look squeezed in quite nicely. There's the dodgy lighting from the summer camp. Pretend you didn't see that. Another example here, 1.5 again by 2 foundations. It's another main bedroom, but it's just a tiny bit smaller. So it looks a lot more cozy, a lot more furnished without me trying too hard. Again, another example here. This is 2 by 1.5, I suppose. Different layout, different furnishings. Again, just to give it a bit more character. So next up on the sort of room proportions, hints and tips list, are things like bathrooms, studies, and any other rooms that are just sort of additional pieces to make it feel bigger, to give it more, features, and without taking up too much budget. So bathrooms, I see people make absolutely humongous bathrooms, which is fine. But what you don't want it to do is look too big and not actually look like, again, lived in or otherwise furnished well. So this one, for example, is a one single foundation. It's got two sinks. There's the main bathroom, and I've got enough in here that you can immediately tell what it is. It feels cozy. It feels furnished. Same thing with my study. It's got the desk. It's got the paperwork. It's got enough details for you to understand what it is. It's got a nice little sort of half wall there to give it a bit more detail and characteristic. It does the job. It's enough to show what the room is meant to be, and then it gives you free budget to make things like this. Personal gym, a private gym, sorry, 2 by 1.5, I think it is. Yep. Again, a few details so you know exactly what it is. I mean, you see these sort of things in here, and you're gonna know immediately, regardless. But it gives you free budget to add more rooms, to decorate those rooms enough for people to appreciate what they are, and it means you can have a bigger build ultimately. So let's move on to the more important things about design, layout, etc. So how do you start a build like this? I usually start with the bare basics. So it's a living area, which you can see here. I need a living area. That's an important one. A main bedroom. So we go over here. So I built this sort of section of the house first, the main corridor that connects it all. We need a main bedroom. We need a kitchen, a dining area, obviously a main door. So this was the starting point. I started with this long corridor here, and the obvious rooms that I need, so like a bathroom, for example, all branching off of it. So it's a very small build at first. And then what I did was use the remaining budget to start adding on rooms one by one. So for example, another bathroom here to make it 2 bathrooms at the time. The gym was one of the last things to add on. The study was next because again, it was a small room that you could use with limited budget being used up. And then there were things like the ensuite. So again, single foundation branching off, and the build just extends from there as much as the budget allows you to do. And then this entire piece or wing, if you want to call it that, of the mansion was added on afterwards. So why does it make sense to do it that way? I think the clear answer is a lot of people, and I used to do the same thing. I used to envisage a huge camp or build. I used to lay the foundations to make it as big as I could. And actually realised very quickly that the budget was so limited that I couldn't furnish it or finish it or detail it in any way I wanted to. So the way I do my builds now is to start with the smallest structure possible. And as I mentioned, just start extending one room at a time so you don't get overwhelmed with trying to fit everything in. You give full attention to each area and room, and you leave yourself plenty of budget to do the details. For example, like the plants outside here, or the foundations for the pathway leading down to the pool, the glass areas around the pool, and so on and so forth. So it gives you enough to work on at each time or each phase of the build, as I say, without using up all of your budget trying to sparsely furnish a huge build that you've sort of bitten off more than you can chew with. So that's why I would recommend people start with a small structure and just extend one room at a time, keeping an eye on that budget, keeping in mind all of the tips that I've given in terms of not using lights if you can help it. Use 1 or 2, but if you'd prefer using that for details like door handles, etc., prioritize that, because ultimately that is what brings the build together rather than bare walls, bare floors, and bare rooms, really. So the next thing, just going into the details of actually structuring the place and making it look, bespoke or different from just your square builds and your rectangular builds, is the idea of free placement. So this was the camp revamp update. Before that, you could only do it in custom worlds. And you can see here just on screen that I'm just displaying a few of the free placed foundations that I've done, just to give the illusion of, this path going down to the pool, the grass around it. These are the green shag carpets, just to give that really deep, rich green feel, and actually to make it look like blades of grass when you're not sort of staring at it for too long and you realize what it is. So why is that helpful? So you can see here I've done just tiny little details. So a slightly elevated foundation line going around the edge just to break it up so it doesn't just hit the floor and finish. I've also got bookcases just at the bottom of the windows. So yes, they're full glass walls, but it just breaks it up. It just makes it look a bit more detailed, a bit more thought out. And again, you can see here little steps leading just out the main door there, or the side door, sorry, onto the pool area. Same with over here, you've got overlapped glass or greenhouse porch railings, just to make it all add up and match up. And then you've got your lowered Starscape foundation for the pool. And again, another little hint and tip there is just trying to get creative with what we actually have. And then you go down into the little terrace piece, and you can see here again, I've just free placed all of these foundations to make small steps that you can actually walk up and down. Quick tip, make sure you can walk up and down your stairs, because it really takes away from the immersion of people trying to walk through your camps when they can't get up custom staircases. So you can see down here as well, small bookcases just to finish off those awkward edges that you can't otherwise finish off, because of course we don't have half walls or anything like that, or quarter walls, whatever, in terms of the the little gaps here. And again, fireplace extensions, make use of them. I've got a fireplace in there, but these just give a solid cut off between one side of the building and the other, and it just adds that bit of effect to that sort of modern build. For my purposes, obviously you can do this for scrappy builds, etc. So those are the details. Free placement, get comfortable with it, and it will become your best building friend. So let's just do a quick free place example and a little hint and tip of how to do it quite effectively. So I'm just going to put 2 foundations down here. Just use the standard one. The reason will become clear very shortly. It's essentially because you've got guidelines, directions, right? You've got this little half piece line here. And what you're going to do is you're going to grab one of them. You're going to go to free mode, drop it down again because there's a bit of awkward thing to it. And you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either click on it, then hold X on PlayStation, whatever the equivalent is to grab something on PlayStation, on Xbox or PC or otherwise, and then use your left stick to move it down through the other one. And then what you want to do is just use your movement button to line it up almost perfectly, I think that is. There you go, you've got a tiny bit there, but obviously I've just done this very quickly just to show you. And then what you can do afterwards is whack your not your wallpapers, your foundation flooring down your textures, and there you go. You've immediately got, like I showed you earlier, a 1.5 length room that you can use as a study, bathroom, etc., etc. And the good thing about this is you can go to a snap piece and start adding those on, and you just do the same again. And actually, it should be better the second time round because you can line it up with your example that you've just done. So that's a quick free place mode for foundations. You can use the same technique for roofs, pieces and that sort of stuff. So the second way you can do it without dragging it yourself is to grab it, go to free place, and then just simply move your entire character. And you can see here I can really, fine place it wherever I please. And the same thing works for if you want to do diagonal steps, diagonal walls. You no longer have to mess around with it. So if you do it where it overlaps but it doesn't overlap too much. Why do you want to do it that way? Because if you want your flooring to not, of course this flooring doesn't work, but if you wanted a different kind of floor that you're not going to be able to notice too much, there you go, you can start doing it. Different shapes, different room sizes, very easily with a free placement mode. So let's move on to the last few pieces of this tutorial essentially. It's furnishing. So how do I furnish a big build like this without running out of budget? I think for me, it's again realizing what you actually need as a bare basic room, for example, living room, bathroom, kitchen, etc., and then extending it like I mentioned earlier in the tutorial. And it's just getting the bare basic furnishings down first of all, so you know you've used that budget and you're not going to finish your build without a sofa, for example. So, for example, living room, I know I need some sofas, I know I need a table, I know I need a TV for me, obviously modern builds, etc. So I put those down first. I've got a pool room, I need a pool table. That's obvious. Bedrooms, I need a bed, I need side cabinets, I need a wardrobe, for example, for me. I need a TV or other furniture that looks like a bedroom. Bathrooms, we need either a shower, bath, toilet. You get the idea here. And it's just placing those down first. So the dining table, for example, I wouldn't have put down these food pieces or the rum bottles or anything like that. I would have just started with the table, the 6 chairs, and the rug. Same with the gym. I've put down the bare basics. I didn't put any of this down until I knew I had enough budget just to furnish them. If I didn't have enough budget, I would have just deleted the room. But like I said earlier, using that technique of one room at a time, extending from that bare basic structure, allows you to really focus on how much budget you have left, not feeling too overwhelmed with the build, and allowing you to furnish each room before moving on. Now, what else do I do when I've furnished a particular room? For example, this bathroom here, I know it's done. I know it's got the few details I want, like a plunger, a rug, etc., a mat, sorry. And what I tend to do in my own mind is close the door. So I know it's fully furnished. I know I can move on. Same with the bedrooms. I know this is fully furnished. I can close that bedroom. And what that does, at least in my mind as a builder, is to almost act as a checklist. And I could do the build one bit at a time, as I say, instead of feeling too overwhelmed. What you don't want to do as well is run between rooms. You don't want to sit here and go, let's whack a sofa down here. Oh, by the way, I've remembered I need a bar stool over here. And by the way, I remembered I need a kid's bed over here for this room here. One room at a time, complete it, furnish it, move on, and just keep ticking those boxes before the build comes together quite naturally. So, effective budget use. Just a final few notes on this tutorial, and then what I'll do is I'll start splitting off into small tutorials for like swimming pools and that sort of fun stuff, double roofs designs. So what you want to do is you want to try and hide areas that you don't need to furnish or don't need to use budget on. So for an example, this custom kitchen build that I did, it's all made up of these bookcases and also the modern home counters. You can't see the modern home counters from the sides because I just wanted it for that black nice countertop. So I've used bookcases, but what I've done is only use bookcases for the front piece. So you can see here, if I highlight that, if you can see that, it's only these front pieces that are actually covered by the bookcases. Of course, this one, because it's the bar, you need it on both sides. But at the back here, it's only the modern home counter that's underneath. You can't use bookcases where you don't need to see them. I know in your mind you probably think it looks and feels better, but if you don't see it in a normal walkthrough of the build, you don't need to place it and you don't need to waste that camp budget. Same thing with my utility room. It's a small room here. Behind these bookcases, there's nothing. It's dead space. There's no wallpaper behind there. Why? Because I couldn't think of anything to put behind there. And actually what I wanted to do was make this utility room an interesting shape. I suppose the idea would be that all the plumbing and sort of fun stuff for the sink is behind that wall there. But of course, no player is going to see that, so you don't need to waste the budget on it. Same with, any of these little details. As an example, some of these are in the wall, so you don't have to worry about what they look like unless somebody's going to go into free cam somehow and start looking around. Same with my bookcases. Last example, there's nothing behind there, no wallpaper again. It's one single wall, and the bookcases I have doubled up, of course, because you could otherwise see them from here. But again, example after example, there's the table, there's the bookcase. There's no other bookcase behind it. It seems like a simple thing to point out, but actually it saves you probably quite a bit of budget, especially when you're doing custom builds like this and you're trying to really squeeze everything you can out of each piece of your budget to decorate the entire thing. So just to finish up with this particular build, how do you finish a build like this? I think when you've used that budget, and you can see at the top of my screen there, I've got nothing stored. I've probably got enough for a couple more items. I didn't use that budget just simply because I didn't want to force any sort of additional detail that I didn't think was needed. I feel like I had enough in here. But what I did do is start using that budget that's spare for things that are quite budget intensive, let's call them. So like chessboards for things like this. I've got a nice little mystery magazine package on the side to make it look like a bit of a newspaper. I've got a toaster, not a toaster, a scale in the chessboard display there, a bread bin, and so on and so forth. The same thing in the gym, just to add one or two tiny details that people immediately look at. That's a conduit, that's not a chessboard, but there, the dumbbell piece and the weights here. It's just adding those tiny little details. Again, umbrella stand, using up that budget, not forcing yourself to use the budget just because it's there. If you end up with 70% budget and you're happy with your build, stop there, because often if you force it, you can tell. So things like a dog bowl, for example, or a dog, food bin, whatever. Just whack them in there. Use that budget just to add one or two tiny details. Finish the build off, and it doesn't have to just be chessboards. It could be other things. So, for example, in this cabinet set, I've added enough detail so you know what it is, but I haven't tried to squeeze everything in there. You need your build to look lived in, look furnished enough that it's not bare, and also, as I mentioned earlier in the video, to make sure that everyone can walk through this build and realise what each room is and what it's meant to be, and hopefully appreciate the build and appreciate the detail in every room and spend the time in each room to have a look at those small details and wonder why, how you did it or why you did it. Again, I think that's Audrey's journal. I can't remember. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But again, it's in a study. It's a book, or in an office. Sorry, it's a book. So just use the rest of that build just to finish it off. As I say, don't force yourself. Use as much budget as you can, but make it lived in and finished. So there you go. Hopefully, a helpful sort of tutorial as such, or a little video just to walk through how I did my biggest mansion build in Fallout 76. A few hints and tips in there. Hopefully, you can take away and use for your own builds. As I say, I'll split off into smaller tutorials, things like the swimming pool, the terrace, the custom walls, the custom shapes, that sort of stuff. And we'll just try and break those down into more detailed videos with demonstrations. But for now, hopefully, it just gives you a detailed walkthrough of this build here. If anyone wants to see this, it's on PlayStation 5. So if you're on PlayStation, do add me. It's the same as my channel on PlayStation. Give me a little message or a comment in the down below to see if you want to join up and just have a look at these builds firsthand. I do them all in adventure build now, the adventure mode, sorry, so people can visit them, and people do. I often have people coming here while I'm in a public server, just to have a look round, and I get messages and that sort of stuff. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for the support, and hopefully we'll speak soon. So until then, keep building and hopefully keep supporting the channel. Thank you to the 1,000 or so subscribers now. I do very much appreciate it. So speak soon. Take care.